Hi, good afternoon. My name is Renata Sutton, and today I'm going to talk to you about standardizing and validating medical simulation equipment procurement across the Air Force Medical Services. This was all made possible by the men and women of the Air Force Medical Modeling and Simulation Training Program, or AFMAST, located at Randolph Air Force Base, a team that I was very proud and honored to be their program manager for the last almost 2 years. So let's start the conversation by really discussing what AFMAST is and what it does for the Air Force Medical Services. So the Air Force Medical Modeling and Simulation Training Program identifies, purchases, manages, and oversees medical simulation across the Air Force. Anything that has to do with medical modeling and simulation is either identified, purchased, or oversaw by AFMAST. Most of our time is spent providing oversight of the simulation that actually happen in each one of the 90 facilities that we have. 76 medical groups that we support, plus multiple training platforms that has either equipment or simulation operators that are trained and supported by AFMAST. We also validate equipment requirements for every medical facility. Every medical facility that requires or requests better than any equipment, any simulation equipment, they have to be validated by AFMAST. We also purchase all the validated equipment packages, which of course must be supported by training objectives. So instead of sending money to each one of the different 76 locations, the Surgeon General decided that AFMAST would be the body that would receive all the funds, validate, and purchase the equipment packages that were submitted by each of the facilities. AFMAST also governs the contract for simulation operators. We have 56 contractors that are at 30 different sites, and they are centrally funded. This contract is at AFMAST, and we provide the oversight not only for the actual operators and the actual contract, but also for their training and their further development and anything else that would go along with that. Beyond the contracted simulation operators, we also understand that our 56 contractors at 30 sites sleep out of the 46 sites without any expert simulation operators. So we developed online training so that augmentees can attain this training online on our 5 most utilized high-fidelity simulators. Another chunk of our time is spent on testing and researching new simulators, bringing them into the office and playing, in quotation marks, with the simulators, validating their capabilities, making sure that if the simulator can and is supposed to support a needle decompression, that the site is actually correct and not at some other location. Anatomically incorrect. And based on what we find, we provide feedback to the industry. And that actually happened with the trauma simulator. It came to us. We were doing a needle chest decompression, and it wasn't in the second intercostal space. It was in the fourth. It wasn't accurately anatomically, and after discussing with the company, their initial response was, well, you can still perform it and hear the whoosh from the catheter breaking the pleura, and we decided not to purchase a simulator unless it would be anatomically correct, and the company decided to go back and re-engineer the simulator so that it could support anatomically that the muscle memory development that so much of simulation involves. Another chunk of our time is spent with our curriculum development team on validating training scenarios through the subject matter experts, or SMEs, to ensure not only the accuracy but the validity of what is being trained out there. We are currently working with our cardiology consultant at the Air Force Medical Operations Agency to ensure that even though it is coming from the American Heart Association, that is the way that he wants everybody who is ACLS certified to actually provide that training. Our curriculum development support is also available for any new training platform that is supported or support the Air Force Medical Services. However, we are not in the business of telling folks that simulation is the way of moving forward with the training objective. What we want to do is to be able to provide the SMEs or those who are developing a curriculum, once they identify that the best methodology for that specific training environment is simulation, then we assist them on finding the right simulation to go along excuse me, with that training platform. And lastly, but certainly not least, our ITIM branch does all of those online trainings to include serious medical games. We currently have 4 different medical games. They're open in our public site, and all you need is a CAC and to be added to the list, and you can come and play. There's an EMEDS ICU and EMEDS ER, a point of injury National Registry EMT basic scenario, and the Safe Surgical serious medical games, which is really a patient safety based scenario. So a little bit of history on AVMAST. It came about in around 2008. It was based on the fact that folks were just requesting money left and right. There was no validation. There was no real location for anybody to go to and make sure that what they were purchasing first was a valid request, that they had the training requirement to support that equipment, that they had the medical logistics support, and also medical equipment support to accept all that equipment. So the Surgeon General back then decided that one central location would be the belly button for all of the simulations. So all of the money for medical simulation would go to AVMAST, so every medical group didn't have to budget or request funds for the purchase of medical simulation. They would simply put the package together, send it to AVMAST, and AVMAST would then provide the money that went along with it. However, since nobody really knew exactly how to handle the whole situation, and with the culture that many of our services have, that if you have money, you must spend it, the AVMAST really spent a lot of time trying multiple validation efforts, trying to figure out a way of saying, okay, if your training requirement is BLS only, you do not need a SimPERM 3G, you need a CPR ANE. And that was something that took a very long time to develop and to actually be accepted by the field. It wasn't until sequestration in 2012 that that fiscal responsibility and budget conscience effort really got in the forefront of what most of our military did, and AVMAST was very successful at being able to meet its mission without actually trying or requesting an increase in funds or having to validate the money that they still had. And around that same time, AFI 41-209 came about, and it was updated in 2016, and paragraph 6.8.2 specifically states that any medical high-fidelity simulation equipment has to be validated and approved and purchased by AVMAST, meaning that if anybody else decides to use their funds that were allocated for something else to purchase high-fidelity simulators, that the contracting world is supposed to stop that purchasing package and process until they have FMAST approval and validation, because we are charged with validating the training requirement and approving that the specific requested equipment is the right equipment for the training objective. But that took a very long time to come about. Of course, we're talking all the way from 2008, and it wasn't until 2014 that we really started to see some progress. So 6 years. And in the meantime, our logisticians spent many hours chasing packages, being called at the last minute by contractors saying, hey, we need you to do a quick turnaround on X, Y, and Z, because we really will not be able to get this done if that's the way it's going to be. So really, every single package would have a different quote for the same equipment with different additions. It was just unsustainable. And that's when the SimPERM came about. It actually stands for the Simulation Procurement Equipment Requirements Matrix. Our logistician, with the assistance of the curriculum development, took a look at all the simulators that we had and picking up the most common ones, used an Excel spreadsheet and listed agnostically all the training objectives that we knew could be met. So it is just a plain, and you will see soon in our pictures, it's a plain spreadsheet, and all it lists is the training objectives. If your training objective requires certain things to be done, you check the box on the actual training objectives that need to be met. There's nothing that says which simulator actually meets that, so there's no loyalty to a specific company. There's no argument such as, oh, all I have are Gamard simulators, I have to get Gamard simulators forever. There's no such a thing. Once that list was completed, we decided to pick a couple of our most common training platforms and try and make sure that the right simulator would actually be selected by this. So we selected some training objectives to be met. We allowed the spreadsheet to actually do the calculations, and all it does is list for us under the name of each one of the simulators that we have listed, which simulator met the most number of training objectives. Once that is done, that is given to the program manager to identify the best available simulator at the best cost for the government. That is a caveat because, for example, there's a simulator that costs $200,000 that meets most training objectives. However, you do not need that simulator if all you're doing is ACLS. So we look at the training objectives and see which one is the best fit. If all you do is ACLS, you don't need it to go on an airplane. It doesn't have to be airworthy, so that is something that the program manager will discuss with the site and make sure that it is truly needed or not, and based on the conversation that goes back and forth, then identify the simulator that best meets the training objectives at the best cost for the government. So the program manager then discuss with the remaining staff, make sure that nothing was missed, and the process is repeated multiple times to ensure that no calculation errors occurred, that all training objectives are listed, the right simulators are listed, and we continue to do that as we go along and ensure that every new option that comes on the market gets added. So this is a picture of the actual instructions. So when you go to our website and you hit on the SimPERM, which is what we tell every site to do if they believe they need a new simulator, this is the first thing that they see. These are the directions. So your step 1, you select the tab corresponding to the age range for the patient carrying learning objectives you need. Are you looking for training objectives for a baby, a child, an adult, or even the OB patient. It is very important that those requesting the equipment are very much keyed on the fact that there's no simulator that does it all. For example, I don't have a simulator that is commercially off the shelf. It's going to be an OB simulator that has a chest wound and a left below the knee traumatic amputation. So don't try to put all of your training objectives into one simulator. Concentrate on your current training gap, and request those training objectives that are specific to that training gap. So then you mark all those learning objectives you're looking to train or evaluate at your site. You save the spreadsheet in the format that is listed over there, and it comes to me at the program management office, or the future program managers. That will change. And then the program management office or the PMO will sit down and not only calculate it, but it will also forward the information to discuss with the remaining staff. So this is what we were talking about. These are the list of training objectives that we know with a high degree of confidence we can meet, and it goes on and on. You can hit the different tabs on the bottom to go to the different simulator groups. This is just showing part of your cardiovascular circulatory systems. We go down to every single system, and it is very detailed. If it can be performed by the simulators that we have listed, it will be listed here as a training objective. So once that is saved and emailed back to us at the program management office, the calculations go in, and if a training objective was checked, then it will match it to the simulators that can do it. And over here on the top are our most common simulators. So as you go along, you can see nobody can, when they are checking those training objectives, unless they are going to click all, which is a red flag for me, that they are just trying to fish for a very expensive simulator. We will see which one is able to do what. And at the very bottom, it will tell us which one is the best fit, or at least which one meets the most training requirements. This specific simulator over here was a requirement for a teeterless pre-hospital trauma scenario simulator. So, of course, immediately all of my OB simulators are out the door. But just the fact that the Noel was able to meet 14 of those training objectives tells me that they are really pushing some training objectives that are not necessarily keen on that. So then your CAE HPS is usually the one that is extremely expensive, and it really does not meet my training objectives. So if I come down here and I look for the two simulators that has the best or the most number of training objectives, that would be the MAT, the KGS MAT, the multiple amputation, and then the SimPERM 3G trauma. So then I had to look and see, are these truly the best simulators? And yes, as far as being ruggeded and being able to be dragged through dirt and do some of those more traumatic scenarios, that really is the best. Those two are the best ones. The SimPERM 3G 6 to 6,000, the KGS, by the time you do the upper and the lower, they get to be, they still are a little cheaper. And I called the site and I said, okay, what exactly are you trying to do with this? And they were doing a pre-deployment course for some folks that were going to a very remote area in Afghanistan, and they wanted as much reality as possible. Well, the mat KGS gets to move around, and it really makes a very unnerving situation. So I gave them the option between the two of them, and they actually would like to have the mat. So since there was training objective, mats were the same, and the cost was cheaper for the KGS mat, we were able to not only validate the training requirements at the site and that the simulator would meet their training objective, we also were able to save $25,000. So that basically is how the SimPERM works, by basically eliminating everything else that does not even sit in the ballpark. So we have had quite a big success with the SimPERM. The FMAS processes an average of 35 equipment packages yearly just for high fidelity simulations, excuse me. The average cost for each one of those packages is about $127,000. Before the SimPERM, really, we were bombarded by medical groups requesting us for equipment that the vendor was trying to convince them they needed. Really, you need a Toyota to go back and forth to work. You don't need an Audi R8. And they were being convinced that the Audi R8 is the only way they could get to and from work. But since the SimPERM, FMAS has been able to validate training requirements, really seeing what the field is actually training on. We've been able to identify without vendor bias the best fit for the training objectives. It is not about sitting there and buying an Audi. It's about finding the best fit. What is it that you need, not want? Anybody that has been involved with purchasing anything for the government, it usually is a very lengthy process with 3 different quotes and validating everything that you need. But by using the SimPERM, we already have the quotes on top because our logistics department got with the vendors and we know we negotiated a price, and we're validating that that's the right simulator based on the training objectives. So it eliminates the 3 quote requirement for purchase. And that really has expedited the centralized purchase. It used to take us 6 months plus to get a simulator from the moment it got to FMAS until it got delivered to the medical group. Now we are seeing packages, once it hits our door, getting delivered to the MTF in 30 to 40 days. And we really were able to neutralize that vendor influence and really shifting that culture from being vendor driven to requirement or training requirements based. And at the end of the day, probably the best of the results is that it really has validated that AFMAS is the subject matter expert for simulation equipment. We know what we're talking about, regardless as to how long one specific person sits in a specific MTF and goes to 1 or maybe 2 symposiums a year, and they think that they just know everything about it because a specific company told them that no doubt about it, this is the best. We really have solidified the fact that we are the SMEs when it comes to simulation equipment. The implementation of the SimPERM went very smoothly. Got a little gripes and complaints from a couple of folks as far as not being able to get what they want, but everybody that has requested equipment has gotten what they need. Since then, vendors come to FMAS into our basement and ask to demonstrate their equipment. They know that if that equipment is not in our SimPERM, that they are not going to get orders from the Air Force. So they want to show us the new equipment, they want us to validate their capabilities, and they want to be added to the SimPERM. Again, we have successfully shifted the culture from vendor-driven to training objectives-based. We have saved an average of $1.1 million a year by finding the right cost for the required training objectives, and that money goes right back and is reinvested into other simulation initiatives. So really solidifying the cost consciousness culture that really was needed within not only the government but the medical field as a whole. And really, every time that we had to get into a professional argument over what a medical group wanted and got, we approved the packages always vendor agnostically. It does not matter to us one way or another what vendor gets approved for a specific package. We always approve the packages based on training objectives. And the other thing is that sometimes they ask us for something that they think they're going to get. They'll ask us for a mat, but the mat doesn't do something that the 3G trauma does. Even though the 3G trauma really costs $25,000 more, I will call them and say, listen, what you're requesting is not going to meet all of your training objectives. I am approving you for something that does more, even though it costs more. And probably the biggest thing that the SimPERM did for us is that it avoids the costly warranties. So there are sites that decide that they need to get the warranty, and we will not approve it because we did a study and identified that in most instances, just like our cars, nothing breaks until the warranty expires. So there are sites that use their equipment so often that they decide, listen, I really need to have the warranty, and that's up to them. But we were able to validate that for the average site, for the average user, a warranty does not pay for itself. And most of those warranties cost over $12,000 each. So more money that goes into buying more equipment for other personnel, or other sites, excuse me. So in conclusion, the SimPERM was developed as a procurement strategy to reduce the unnecessary equipment warranty purchases, or in other words, unnecessary costs that were driven by wants and not needs. We were able to focus on identifying the best value equipment to meet the training objective, and provided the end user reliable tool to identify equipment options independent of vendor-driven marketing of the top-of-the-line products and services. Again, the Toyota, not necessarily the Audi A7. Sometimes you need the Audi A7, but most of the times you don't. We were able to eliminate unnecessary purchases by 20% per year. And again, that money goes right back into the program to provide other resources. And we were able to increase the overall number of MTFs FMAS can support with simulation equipment because the money saved goes right back into the program. One of the things that I am extremely proud of is the fact that we reduced the need for costly extended warranties. Again, putting the money right back into validated training packages without having to ask for any more money. And probably one of the biggest validations we have about the SimPERM is that the Navy Medical Modeling and Simulation Training Program has recently adopted the SimPERM as their procurement tool, further validating the success of this tool and how important it is to ensure that we keep on building on that budget-friendly, cost-conscious culture that really is the future for our government. Thank you for your support and for your time, and I'm available for any questions if there are any.